Today we finally disassemble a legend. With no parts markup and only a $75 build fee, Redux gaming PCs are the obvious choice for gamers who demand the best without paying extra. With as little as a few clicks, you'll get a PC optimized for you and the games you play at a price that fits your budget, and all Redux PCs are backed by a 2-year warranty. To see all that Redux has to offer and to start configuring your next PC, head to the link in the description below. All right, this guy has been sitting in the back bench for over a year, maybe a year and a half. Now the one we built to replace it's sitting there. No, that's because we're gonna probably do a different video about cloning, creating a .iso for moving one Windows per drive build to another drive, which we've talked about in the past, but it's NVMe, so it's a little bit different to do. But anyway, I know those words are hard. This has been sitting for a long, oh jeez. I made those tighter one year because I got tired of it flopping open too easy and I might have pushed the tabs a little too tight. But anyway, this loop has been sitting here remember I took the pump out when we started that one. So these are just some of the leftover parts that are sitting here. Most of the chrome on these fittings is probably not worth reusing because we talked about how over time the fittings will start to break down, the nickel plating. But what I'm gonna show you real quick is I'm gonna actually start up this bottom loop because it's still complete. In fact, let's take the panels off so you guys can actually see the loops. That's the 560 rad. This is a single radiator right here. It's a 560 millimeter, 45 millimeter thick, crazy ass PC rad thing. You could probably cool a car with it or at least a motorcycle for sure. But this is the true fluid, not the View, because remember the View has the swirlies in there. This is basically the same thing without the swirlies. But anytime you go with any sort of an opaque fluid, it settles if you don't run it. So, for your guys' enjoyment and my nastiness to deal with this now, I'm gonna show you guys what that looks like when it remixes. And then I'm gonna completely tear this case down, take all the components out of it. We will be using this case in the future. That much I promise you. I love this case. It's just nothing is worthy of being inside of it right now. Maybe when Threadripper releases its 5000 series Threadrippers, which will give you the IPC we need. Intel's reportedly coming out with new Extreme platform stuff. We've got DDR5 coming out. We got some serious upgrades about to happen to everyone's computers. Now when it comes to the backside, this was definitely one of those instances where you just don't care about the back because of the fact that you don't see it. Look at that. You can even see, I just kept orange cables for when it was orange because I'm like, well, I don't see it anyway, so what's it matter? Let's go ahead and fire up the loop real quick and see what kind of grody-ness comes out of there. Ew. I mean, it actually went back to looking proper pretty quickly though. It's not that bad now. That's what it normally looks like. It's just completely settled. The nice thing is about it remixing as easily as it did, means that it's probably not gonna be sitting there all nasty, like gunked up somewhere. So that's why I went ahead and just powered it up so you guys could see, one, what the fluid originally looked like, and two, so that I could get it kind of mixing around, because I am gonna have to drain this loop. And you get to see why drain plugs are so important. But yeah, it mixed up nice. There's times I've seen it go to mix up and you'll see big chunks, just like a big boogers just floating around in there. I do like and miss that color. That color was so just slime. Would you call it? You always called it Nickelodeon gack.
Yeah, look, big slime too.
Yeah, it looks like slime. I love it.
I think Nick slime was not as bright though.
I do miss that color. Anyway, all right, that mixed up enough. So the nice thing about this is there are still totally usable parts in this system. This was actually the UV strip. It was a dual RGB, and then on one side it's just UV, because this was a UV reactive coolant. But these are the cable mod cables, which have the aluminum combs on there. So these are still totally usable. These are plugging in. These will work with any EVGA power supply. It's nice about EVGA power supplies, and not just the fact that I'm a fangirl for EVGA, but the fact that they use the same pinouts on all their power supplies, new ones, old ones. Once you're past the Nova G2s, which had the early, not the Nova G2s, the early Novas. Past that, they're all the same plugs, which are great. So you should also verify that though on your own before you go plug it in. So be like, Jay says they're all compatible. I'm saying do your own due diligence. But I'm saying that I now have more green cables that I can use somewhere if I wanted. And you guys will probably be asking me like, well, then why didn't you just use those cables with the new build that you did? Because I didn't use the 1600 watt power supply in the new build. Remember, I used 1000 watt, and there was absolutely no reason to put this in there. However, if a new Threadripper build or platform does come out, then I might do a multi-GPU completely pointless setup for the sake of it's just completely unusable, which makes it great. So before we drain the loop, I want to get all these wires and stuff out of here because my drain plug is in the bottom. And you guys are gonna, this is one of the drain systems that I was most happy about because this used to be soft tubing down in the basement, and then I completely changed it over to rigid tubing everywhere, which was just kind of the first time I had done that. Normally I would use soft tubing anywhere you couldn't see it and it was hiding. But the problem is that when I would do that, the plasticizer would start to leach off of the soft tubing and then make its way into the loop. And we thought that might have been what was causing some of the discolorations that we saw with the orange and the yellow in this system. So because I switched it all to PETG, meant that I at least ruled that out. Ever seen a 1600 watt power supply look so small? I think next time I build this, I'd like to do the cable routing to where each individual cable strand is measured so I can get those perfect bends. But then that means I'd have to make it myself. And that scares me because I've never actually made cables before. And I really fear that I'd screw it up. There. This is like 20 or 25 pounds worth of cables and power supply. One of the things I never really updated with Skunk Works as I went was the SSD solution. So I had a 240, a 480, and then two 4 terabyte spinning drives. So it was one of those like, you know, it started to really feel slow as the SSDs got full and they were SATA SSDs. So this thing desperately needed updates in terms of that. These were always cool. These are fan splitter sleds that you used to be able to get from like various like mod shops. So it can be powered by Molex, and then it would just split full speed to 3-pin fans. Things have changed over the years where now everything's PWM, so that probably wouldn't have been as exciting today, and it was just Velcroed on there. But this is nice if you need to split 3-pin for something. I actually had this being controlled off the motherboard, by the way. So that's why nothing was plugged in here. I created a reverse cable that, and I made this cable myself, that plugging into that would then just split the signal to all the other fans. And then I would set the motherboard on the high amp header to 3-pin DC fan, and then I could control the duty cycle in the motherboard. So it allowed me to control, these were the top fans. These are the bottom ones right here. So you can see I have one there. And you can see once again, no Molex plugged into there. However, I was able to control them because this cable, which I made, was going to the motherboard, then splitting that DC percentage to the fans. Now, it was always a little bit less, right? Because 12 volt, actually I don't think it was, when you reduce the percentage, it reduced the voltage, right? But as it splits to each individual fan, each fan got a little bit less than that actual voltage. But the motherboard did a pretty good job at providing plenty of power for the fans. Most of the time I ran the fans at full speed. I did have a fan profile set up, but because I've always been the kind of guy that cared about maximum performance and less about noise, meant that I just would run them at full speed. So there is the tubing in the basement. Look at that. Not a whole lot, is there? Literally one tube that's a 90 bend up to the pass-through fittings, and then one that comes down and goes into the rad. So you can see how clean that was. That was a very long run, but only a simple 90. And then here is my drain plug, or drain valve down here, that was on a swivel so I could move it, which means because it's closed off right now, I could take off that cap, put in a soft tube, and then when I open that, it drained really well because that's equally at the bottom of the loop where the rad is. So the only coolant that wouldn't make its way out is some of the coolant that would get stuck in the bottom few rows of the radiator right there. I can't remember if this one's delidded. I don't think it's delidded. I also don't remember which CPU this is in here. Oh yeah, that's the one we lapped also. Wasn't the greatest lap job, but still was a lap job nonetheless. You can see how there was a high spot. Oh yeah, it's delidded. See? All right, so on the back now, I've got a tube going to one of our 5-gallon little drain drums that we got. And I'm taking off one of these upper caps. I've talked about this a million times. This just makes draining a whole lot easier because remember, air in, well, liquid out has to equal air in. Otherwise, it'll just go slowly. So opening up a cap at the top, one that doesn't have water going through it somewhere, is a must. So now I'm just gonna open up the valve that I showed you on the backside. And we're just gonna let gravity do its thing. So since the loop is complete and we have areas like, I mean, this kind of stuff's gonna happen when you use that translucent fluid or that opaque fluid. So I want to do a little bit of flushing on this before I take all the pieces off. I'm probably still gonna require a disassembly of blocks and things to get it to look right, but this at least will make things a little bit easier. So I've capped off everything on the backside. I'm gonna fill with, this is just drinking water actually. I'm perfectly fine with just filling all this kind of stuff with drinking water, because I want to get a lot of this broken up as much as possible. And then I'll just flush this a few times. Yeah, there we go. See how much of that's still in there, like in the pump and stuff? So what I'm gonna do now is my old method of continuing to, like I'm gonna crack the drain valve on the back. And I'm gonna continue to fill this while it's going down, and eventually it'll get clear. So you can see how the level's going down. That's because the drain valve is just barely cracked to allow it to continue to bypass the radiator and let some of the fluid work its way out. So I'm constantly replacing the green fluid with clean, clear fluid. And I'm just gonna keep doing this until it gets a lot less green and turns a lot more clear. Okay, so this is the last bottle I'm gonna put through of the clear. We probably did about 10 bottles. We also were using the hot part, the hot faucet part, so that the heat could kind of break up some of the sediment. You can see this is still not perfectly clear, but this is a better starting point than just having all the green stuff. The blocks, when you see the face of them, they're pretty gross. We're gonna have to clean those. Fortunately, they're not hard to clean. We've showed in the past how to do that. It's definitely clearer than it was though, that's for sure. Ew. Oh. Look at the GPUs. Ow. That was on the tip of my brain. Whoa. It's fine. The size of that radiator. For those of you that have never seen a 560 rad, allow me to give you some size comparisons. So everyone talks about, oh my God, 480s are so big. That's a 480. There's your 360. There's your 240. So, any questions as to why I went with a 560 in a case that would support it? It's the best part about this case when there's nothing in it. And it's also really light like that. Anyway, we'll leave that like that for now. We're gonna move over here. I'm just gonna take the motherboard and stuff off. Oh yeah, and can we just take a moment to appreciate stuff like removable motherboard trays, and take a moment to also still be mad about Thermaltake putting Case Labs out of business for stealing their own designs and then suing them for it. You heard me right. Thermaltake sued Case Labs over their own designs that Thermaltake stole from them. Let that be a lesson. Always patent your designs. Anyway, if you guys are wondering why I don't like Thermaltake, that's always been why. It's been so long since I've been able to do this and just be like, look at the amazing power that I hold in my hands. Sad day. Gotta clean up all these fittings, which I think these fittings are actually gonna be reusable, because I changed these when the GPU loop was redone, when I did the 2080 Ti's, when I switched from the Titan XPs, and so I think those will be salvageable. Of course, we're using our trusty iFixit kit. No explosions on this one. No time. Doesn't even make sense.
What?
Nice about the magnetic tips on the iFixit. It also makes them really easy to put back together. Whoa. Okay, well that worked. I love when it just falls apart in my hand. All right. So most of it, as you can see, was actually stuck to the plexi, which is the perfect, that'll come nice and clean. Don't use too much alcohol on acrylic, obviously, and make sure you clean it right away, because The alcohol will discolor it if you leave it on there. I guess I could technically do this. I could just undo this. This is the rear light bar thing. See, now there's no electronics going to it. So we can just clean this part under the sink. That's loose because obviously I wanted to be able to get it off. This part right here, I'm gonna use the toothbrush. We'll come back when it's all done so you can see what a clean one looks like next to the dirty one. So you can see, what I love to show is so many people think, oh man, I need a new block or something, because they'll look at the discoloration and they'll think that that means it's ruined. It's not. You'd be surprised just how robust a lot of these parts actually are. I wanna get that flow plate off there. Yeah, you'd be surprised how clean this stuff will get if you just take your time with it. So just to give you a little bit of a reminder, this is what the unclean one looks like, and with a little bit of time and effort, and without even having to take the block off the graphics card, that is what the clean one looks like. So you can see it looks brand new. I mean, that quite honestly looks like it's brand new out of the box. I just used the isopropyl alcohol on the nickel plated part. Took the O-ring out, cleaned it, re-lubricated it. Not lubricated, but just dampened it so I could get all the stuff off. I don't use alcohol specifically to clean the O-ring. And then I took the plexiglass part, because this is plexi, over to the sink, and I just used hand detergent with my toothbrush and then worked all the corners and stuff to make sure I could get it all out. And then I took a microfiber towel to wipe it all dry. Well, actually I used the air compressor thing, a little air blower right there, this guy, to get all of the water off. Made sure all the water and stuff was, anywhere it got wet in the card was also blown out. And then used the clean, brand new microfiber to clean the plexi. Make sure I don't push hard to scratch it. And that's what we're left with. So this is a perfect working order 2080 Ti water cooled. This one still works, but obviously doesn't look as good. And we're gonna do the same thing real quick to the CPU block. CPU block. So that's the CPUs before. Looks like we cooled it with mustard. So we'll just go ahead and take this one apart on camera because it's only 4 screws. You'll see how simple the new vector blocks. They come apart from the bottom of the cold plate, just like any other old EK block. Only these are a little bit simpler on the inside. It's like glued. There's nothing holding it together right now, just other than the paste that, there we go, essentially the goopy stuff made. So the RGB ring is right there. And you can see the flow plate and everything now is a part of the block. So you don't have to worry about taking this apart and getting in the wrong order. There's the jet plate. There's our mustardy looking stuff. There's our O-ring. See, that's why you take the O-ring out and clean it, because look, it's gross in there. So this particular cold plate, as you can see, still has some greenish yellow in there. This is the one that had the air exposed to it for ever since I took out the other loop a long time ago, probably 6 months or more. So this one's looking like it's stained. Some of it's coming off. This is one of those that if I were to use my Crest 3D white, I could probably get it to come off because it's got the abrasive crystals, and just take some time working my way, through there. It would come clean. It's just with the first initial soap, it's not coming clean. So I'm just gonna put this one back together for now. I'm not gonna worry too much about it because of the fact that I'm not gonna be using this block again probably. I don't know, maybe not. So let's go ahead and let me button this block back up and we'll talk about future plans for this case. I said earlier in this video that if something epic comes along from Intel or AMD, whether it be the new Ryzen Threadripper, 5000 series Threadripper, or Intel apparently has an answer coming with some of their X series stuff. I don't know what they're gonna call it in terms of X whatever. This chassis has some more teardown to deal with. Like, I gotta take this off, obviously. I gotta deep clean it. It's textured, so dirt really just gets its way stuck in there. Like, it just gets in all of the media blasted panels, as you can see. This is still the absolute best case I've ever built in for water cooling because of the amount of stuff that you can fit in it. Gotta take the front fans off. It can be fully disassembled with screws. I mean, Case Labs is one of those cases that it was the first one to really make it, actually, when you would buy these, by default, they came flat packed unless you paid for an assembly service where they would then send it in a crate kind of a deal. But I do want to bring this case back alive. No, I'm not gonna sell it. I've had, I don't know how many people message me asking me if they could buy it, because again, Case Labs went defunct 5 years ago or so. So it's one of those, maybe even longer than that. So it's one of those, this is kind of like a barn find in a way. You just cannot get these anymore. Rarely does anyone sell them because they know that these were just like the symbol of like the ultimate just overkill case. They're not the most stylish. They're very rectangle and 90 degrees squared and just nothing exciting about them. But what you can fit inside them and the fact that there are aftermarket products out there still floating around. When the case company kind of went defunct, so did a lot of the aftermarket support, but there are distro plates for the bottom. There's distro plates for the back wall. I mean, all sorts of cool stuff that we can do and stuff that we can have made or even make ourselves if I finally want to take a shot at making distro plates. So where I think it'd be neat if I had a distro plate on the bottom and a distro plate on the top, but the top distro plate had fittings lined up so I could still use 2 tube reservoirs sticking off of it, but then the distro plate has the pump built into them, and then they meet to the bottom distro plate where you have tubes coming up for the CPUs and it all passes through, fittings on the bottom. Because one of the things you might have noticed on my 560 rad here, I don't want to tilt it because it'll leak, is this notch right here that I dremeled into there. It's kind of ugly, but that's because with me using a 45 millimeter thick radiator, this pass-through fitting that you see sticking down the bottom right here, that lined up perfectly vertical with the graphics card depth so the tube could come straight up with the original cards prior to the 2080s TIs. But that was about 4 millimeters too close to the radiator, so the radiator was hitting it. So that's just a shroud that goes on the side to make it look pretty. So I had to notch that so it would clear it. So that's literally how tight this was right here. But if we had a distro plate that had different, places where the fluid can come down and it was recessed back more, then I'd be able to even recess the fans back farther without having them be flush against the grill. Because the problem with the fans being mounted on the outside, this bracket in between pushes them really close to the side panel, which means as the blades are turning, if they're a high-speed fan, then you would hear the turbulence of the blade going past the grill. So then it means I'd be able to actually scoot the radiator back, recess it back more, have the fans on this side of the bracket, giving me, I don't know, another 3 or 4 millimeters of depth before they come anywhere. Actually, more than that, 25 millimeters plus that, because it's the thickness of the fan plus the thickness of the metal pushing it back. So we'd have something like 27 millimeters of space plus the 3 or 4 millimeters that exist before it hits that grill, meaning then I could go with like whatever fans I want down here that are illuminated with lights that won't give me that terrible sound. I tried to use the 140 maglevs to get higher static pressure and higher airflow through them, because those are just the old AF 140s, which were never really intended for radiators, but they still worked. It was just, all I heard was because it was just scooping right past all those hexagons, which was just giving a really weird turbulent sound, and I couldn't listen to that. So I left them non-lit up down there. Do you guys want to see me build another over-the-top multi-part series where we do custom stuff? Not like, oh, look at the custom build I did with tubes. No, like actual custom one-off, only exists in this case type of build. Do you want me to bring it back? If so, it needs a new name. It's not Skunkworks anymore. I don't know what it's going to be, but if you want to see that, it's very important that you guys let me know. Comment down below, like the video, do all that stuff you would normally do to get a creator's attention to say, yes, we want you to do something, or no, we don't want you to do something. That is also a valid answer. Anyway, sound off in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys. The retirement of the original Skunkworks build series / project as we knew it, potentially the rebirth or birth of something new. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.